Bill Mallonee is a lifer.
Yeah, you give it all your heart, 'cause they come to see you swing. You learn to nurse your own hurts and hope the coach doesn't suspect a thing. Sure, it is a long shot, but the sky seemed oh so clear. We may not make it out the bush leagues, but that's not why we're here.
He's a veteran singer-songwriter, capturing the rust and dust of the human experience in haunting songs that are often exhilarating in their specific universality.
Don't feel bad, hey I don't. First you say you will, and then you say you won't. I'm still your friend, it's not bothering me. I plug in this guitar, and the chords are just a prayer up past the stars. Like the spray from hollow seas inside your heart. In your heart, yeah, that's the place where you must answer the phone. For every word, yeah, that you speak, that leaves someone else alone.
Although he got darn close to the big time back in the day, releasing albums that deserved far more commercial success than they ever received, he has become somewhat of a poster child for that overused term, tragically overlooked.
Well, we're parked here at the last verse, and there's so much I seem to forget. It is time to take the test, but I haven't even learned my lesson yet. Sages, they speak in clipped phrases. Prophets, they sing in lamentations. You'll make it some airplay, but just keep it 2-3 minutes in duration. And if their ears are full of wax, well, this too shall pass. And if their backs are turned, we'll just preach it to their ass. The hangman sold cravats by day, his wings at night, it was exceptionally fine. Baby, I was lucky to get out there alive. Oh, baby, I'm lucky to get out of there alive. Baby, I'm lucky. Baby, I was lucky.
Hello, I'm John J. Thompson, and if you're not familiar with Bill Mallonee, I want to set the stage here just a little bit. Back in the early 90s, before Americana was even known as a genre, there was a groundswell of bands and singer-songwriters blending the ethics of the rising alternative rock scene with the grit, gravel, poetic flair, and yes, twang, of southern rock and cosmic country that artists like Graham Parsons and Neil Young had injected into the American rock bloodstream. Even as grunge began to fill stadiums, you could hear the jangling echoes of 60s country rock in bands like R.E.M., Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, the Jayhawks, and Uncle Tupelo. One of the real hotspots for that scene was the Southeast, and in particular, Athens, Georgia. Athens is a college town that brought the world not only R.E.M., but Widespread Panic, the B-52s, Matthew Sweet, of Montreal, and from down the road in Macon, one of our patron saints, Mark Hurd. In fact, Hurd and R.E.M's Peter Buck were two early advocates for Bill Mallonee's band, Vigilantes of Love.
Hey, come and see what I have found in your real downtown, in your real downtown, in your real downtown.
After playing with a couple of other local bands, Mallonee formed the Vigilantes of Love in 1990. After a few years of live shows and a couple of indie releases, and with the production help of Buck and Hurd, Vigilantes upped the ante with Killing Floor in 1992. That album, with a full band sound and more rock-based songwriting, really started to turn heads. The band started to tour more extensively and even landed a deal with the legendary Capricorn Records out of Macon, Georgia.
Oh, Daddy, please don't make me go up that hill. Rough rider like to get himself killed. Now it sure don't look like a vacation spot. We all got malaria, the weather's too hot. All got malaria, the weather's too hot. The White House is calling. Sure ain't gonna charge today. Yeah, looking good on my resume.
Capricorn was one of those beloved labels like Stax in Memphis and Fame in Muscle Shoals that had its roots in the 60s soul and R&B era and was deeply connected to the region in which it was founded. They helped introduce artists like the Allman Brothers, Bonnie Bramlett, the Dixie Dregs, Delbert McClinton, and many others to a wider audience. For a band like Vigilantes of Love, this was huge.
Hear the whistle blowing, train pretty close to leaving. People deal with your ghost, deal with your ghost. Gotta deal with your demon. Going down to the graveyard, going down in the pouring rain. Gonna play some sad guitar, stand out in the hurricane, and I will grab a runaway train. Grab a runaway train. On the 2 tracks, take you out of here, river now. Wanna make you crazy, wanna make you sing.
The band went into the studio with producer Jim Scott, who was also working with Tom Petty and Rick Rubin on the Wildflowers album, to make an album called Welcome to Struggleville, a set that would earn critical accolades, huge fan response, and the strong expectation that their breakthrough was inevitable. Alas, that title, Welcome to Struggleville, seemed to become more prophetic than anyone might have expected.
And in the rust I know the beast is falling. They're building a new gallows when you show up on the street. They're polishing the electric chair. They're gonna give you a front row seat. Heard a sneer outside the garden. Salutations so well healed. Final stop, no points beyond Struggleville. Oh, welcome all you suckers to Struggleville.
Vigilantes of Love was a favorite at True Tunes back in the day. Their blend of real live rock with spiritually dynamic lyrics was mainstream in every way. They belonged on tour with John Mellencamp or The Call, not in the CCM world. Mallonee's spiritual perspectives and his existential struggles with his own failures gave his songs deep resonance, and the band drove those songs home like a sledgehammer. We all expected that, before long, they'd be too big for our little world. The kind of widespread success we all expected, however, proved elusive. But the band soldiered on. More albums, more acclaim, more dashed expectations. True Tunes even helped to release one of their best albums, the Buddy Miller-produced Audible Sigh. That's as close to a perfect Americana rock album as I have ever heard.
So we meet again. Thank you very much. It's great to be back here. Be a friend, make a friend. This song is called It Could Be a Whole Lot Worse. Hey! Kiss for the miles to drive, prayer for when it rains. One shot of perspective, couple more to kill the pain. When all the best metaphors are hitting too close to home. When all the best metaphors are bleeding from your bones.
Bill Mallonee may have had more brushes with greatness, more close calls than any artist I can think of. And while most artists in his position would have given up by now, Mallonee has not. Instead of touring and producing studio-based expensive projects with record labels, he has become a sort of digital troubadour. Despite health challenges, financial obstacles, and increasing obscurity, he continues to write and record new music, mostly out of his home studio outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Largely purchased and supported by a small tribe of fans and friends, he's like a street corner busker for the internet age, the wizened guitar slinger that is way too good to be stuck there, but way too committed to put down his guitar and get a day job.
Darling, let's you and me pick up that ragged little thread and spin us something more lasting than gold. Cunning guards, shaky little hearts, against the dark and against the cold. And don't forget to glance up at the stars and at the moon. Up your change and put it in the world's tip jar. In between hanging in thin air. In between threadbare. In between.
There's just so much music to cover, and so many eras that we want to touch on sonically to take a jukebox break for this episode. Bruce and I have decided once again to simply load her up with music from an assortment of the 70-plus albums in Mallonee's catalog and let them spill out throughout the show. I'll tell you more about the music you've heard at the end and on the show notes page, of course. We let this dark horse out of the barn right after we take care of a little bit of housekeeping.
Hi, I'm Bill Keith, and I'm a Patreon backer of True Tunes. The show is really important to me, and I know that the money I contribute each month goes a long way toward helping with the cost associated with producing and distributing a show of this caliber. And yes, the rewards are cool too. We get early access to new episodes that we can download in a higher quality audio format, as well as invites to exclusive backers-only Zoom hangs and some special swag and stuff. There are multiple levels you can join at, and every gift helps. Check out patreon.com/TrueTunes for more information on how to join me and the rest of the Patreon tribe. And thanks for considering a gift. It really will make a difference.
Hey, this is Ray, and I'm a Patreon backer of the True Tunes podcast. I have also left a rating and review of the show at Apple Podcasts. It wasn't that hard. It didn't cost me anything. But this show means a lot to me, and I know that reviews and ratings make a big difference when it comes to how and if others discover these conversations. Would you take a few minutes, maybe even while you're listening, but please not while you're driving, to leave a rating and review? Even if you don't listen on Apple Podcasts, the reviews posted there push out to podcast platforms all around the world. Oh, and take some time to tell your friends about the show. Let's drive those numbers up together. Thanks.
Welcome back to the True Tunes podcast.
I am honored to be joined in the True Tunes virtual interview suite by my old friend, Bill Mallonee. Paste magazine listed him as one of the 100 greatest living songwriters, and magazines such as Rolling Stone and Billboard had nothing but good things to say as well. He has worked with musicians and producers who have been connected to some of the biggest names out there. And Mallonee continues to write and record new music at a pace that would make most young artists faint. Hopefully you saw our coverage of his recent projects, A Clamoring of Ghosts, Lead On, Kindly Light, and Rags of Absence. Today, though, you can finally hear our long-awaited conversation with the man himself. We'll talk about his early years, those near misses, and what he thinks about music's potential after almost 40 years with a guitar in his hands.
Martin Luther said to one of his brothers, except for one instance, no one can die for another. The devil makes me fearful about my survival. One's gone before to ensure your arrival. Sometimes darkness rolls in, it just takes hold of me. And who knows when the sunrise will be? Sunrise will be.
Well, Bill Mallonee, thank you for joining us on the True Tunes podcast, man. It's great to see you and hear your voice. And
it's good to hear your voice, John.
It'd be nice if it was in person, but it has been a while since we've been in person. But we have spent quite a bit of time in person together over the years. I've got a little bit of notes here just because I know that between the two of us, with all of our history, we could probably end up rambling for hours and never get anywhere, and then Bruce will kill me.
Let's save that for another time. That would be fun to do.
I remember once being with you in Chicago, and the first time you and I were with a group of people getting pizza in Chicago, and you said, "Hey, how about you and I share a pizza?" And I was like, "Okay." And then you said, "Now here's how I like my pizza," and this is what I recall: pesto sauce instead of red sauce. And I was like, "Oh, I don't think I'd ever had pesto sauce." And then garlic, just garlic and cheese and pesto sauce. And then when you ordered it, you're like, however much garlic you think is the right amount of garlic, could you put maybe 3 times that much garlic? And so
did I say that?
Yeah, right. And so we're at this place, and the waitress was like, I can put enough garlic on there to, make your hair fall out. And that pizza was unbelievable. I could not, as I'm eating that thing and you're just gobbling it down, and I'm like, I thought I was tough, but I had never had anything like that in my life. And I had to drive back home out to Aurora with just my whole body just almost in convulsions.
I can't go there with that anymore. One stomach does sort of age with...
that was probably
I can't do that anymore.
And is littered with heartbreaking blues. And no one knows that quite like you. No one knows that truth like you do. You old cowpuncher. Here's what happens when you answer the call with a guitar and a suitcase full of cowboy songs. It'll take your whole life long, you old cow.
Before we get going on the other stuff, how's your health doing? Was moving out there to the desert, was that partly for health reasons? Were you trying to kind of get environmentally clean and...
I'd gotten so tired and burned out of just doing that 85-95 corridor with, hanging a left to Nashville once in a while.
Right.
We landed out here 12 years ago, and we were in Albuquerque, and this is classic, no shows between Albuquerque and Athens GA. So we thought, we'll just look around. So we Craiglisted things, and everything out here is built with adobe, so it all looks like Bethlehem. And we were just, enamored of it, and thought, I think we could do this. And then, one thing led to another. Rents are cheap. We live in a rural area north of Santa Fe, south of Taos. So it is a little dicey sometimes with things like reception and getting to where you need, like if there's a medical emergency or something like that, which has definitely been a bit of a concern. I was diagnosed with lymphoma 2 years ago, and I didn't have to take chemo or radiation. It's what they call small lymphocytic lymphoma. I've got it's like an abdominal region sort of thing. I knew something was wrong 2 years before it was diagnosed. Could never get it properly, imaged. And so when they did come down with the diagnosis 2 years ago, it actually, it's more of a mind game than it is something physiologically going on in your body. It's like, golly day, mortality, that's a bitch.
Oh, right.
And I've been thinking about this stuff since I was 7 years old. I don't know if it was the old guard Roman Catholic background that made you dwell on your failures and mortality and the shortness of life, but it had been ingrained in my bloodstream since day one. But so basically the therapy was, you take these drugs, and the only really negative side effects that makes your heart speed up to like tachycardia levels. And so there's a buffering drug for that. So for 2 years, every 3 months, I was taking a CT scan to see if the tumors, there's 3 tumor sites, if they had shrunk or anything like that. And it was pretty small if it did any shrinking at all. So, but it was holding it in check. So I thought, well, that's something to be thankful for. So, I was praying for healing, and there are a lot of folks out there praying for me. Well, about 4 weeks ago, John, I went in for a PET scan, which is a little bit more astute way of imaging this thing. And they had 3 tumor sites. This is the last thing I'll say. One of them had shrunk 50%. Wow. Another one had shrunk 30%. And the third one, they couldn't even find it. Wow. So I went back to my oncologist. There's a woman and a fellow here down in Santa Fe. And I said, so how do you explain this? And they looked at me and they said, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know. And I said, well, I think it was a miracle. I just said, this chance to witness, pal. This is God. God did this, and the medical profession is always a little leery of that. Maybe not in Nashville, they're not, but the way they're trained, it has to have a clinical way of describing, and miracle just doesn't get it for them. So I said, well, I think it was a miracle. Well, one of the oncologists said, well, I'll tell you what, it is odd that it shrunk that much, but it's a good odd. And Mariah said, well, when you take the words good and odd and put them together, it's God. And I thought that's brilliant. Good enough. Good and odd is God. So anyway, that's where we left it. So good news. I'm back in the saddle and feel great, but it's the first really good piece of, psychological good news that I've had in about 2 years. So there you go. Wow. So anyway, I'm off drugs now. The cancer drugs and the little buffering drug, I'm done with that. So that's a good thing.
You've got about a 35-year or so career singing songs and making music that pretty much from the beginning you were like, screw the easy stuff. We're going straight to the dark side here, and we're going to blast our way through. Like, you're the coal miner with the stick of dynamite that's going straight in. Like, I don't know, I'm going to find my way through this mountain. So I feel like that's probably the way that we start a conversation like this.
All right, well, good. We'll start with the grim and get to the light. That was good. Yeah, but my health is good, and we came to New Mexico just because it is the land of enchantment. It hasn't disappointed. We live right outside the door. We're in the Rockies in a range called the Sangre de Cristo. It's 6,000 feet, and so I drink coffee in the morning and look at the Rocky Mountains, and they'll have snow on them in a minute or two here. So,
wow. Take me back though to the beginning, and tell me about your early days and when music first got under your skin and went from I'm a fan of this stuff, I love this stuff, to no, I'm going to do this. This is going to be part of my life.
Sure,
I'm investing in this.
Yeah,
what was that process?
I think in the early days, I was a young drummer. At age 12, I was playing my first kit, and it was Ringo and Charlie Watts. It was the Beatles. It was the Stones. It was the Byrds. The Byrds is how I even came into Dylan. I didn't care for Dylan initially. It was just a little too whiny for some reason, but I liked Roger McGuinn's rendering of Dylan songs, and that's how I got in the back door to finally appreciating the roots of that kid from Hibbing, Minnesota. But it was slow, and I was just playing drums and thinking, well, I could kind of make a career of this. But the parents, by the time this is Chapel Hill, North Carolina, growing up, and it was a stack of wax in a dusty basement, an unfinished basement with a drum set and a little, LP player with the speakers that I could kind of push out left and right and just rock and learn how to play. play along. And then later on, I was trying to play along with, people like Ginger Baker and John Bonham, and I couldn't touch either of those guys. But, it was still, back to Charlie and Ringo. But Paul Revere and the Raiders, I have to say that too, because I love the Raiders. Yeah. But that's where it started.
Job lost all his daughters. Job lost all his sons. Lost all his crops and his animals. Each and every one. Still I know whom I believe in and persuaded he is able to keep track of all the cards lay down on my table. Hold me tight, I'm losing it. Hold me tight, confusing it.
And then there was a big gap, and I didn't pick up a guitar until I was 31 years old, and then 7 years later, that was part of the Athens, Georgia scene. I was writing, about 75 songs a year and looking for, an outlet for them. So between, playing Athens and Atlanta, which was like 60 miles away, and occasional, gig off up in the East Coast somewhere, that was what I did. Initially, Vigilantes of Love, most people don't know this. I had played in rock bands before, had a lot of work in Athens as a drummer with some of the indie bands that were coming up through the ranks, kind of in the 80s when R.E.M. was, kind of making their, just storming the gates of indie rock. It wasn't even there at first. I mean, they'll tell you this. There wasn't college radio when it was there, but they were still playing Steely Dan and Pink Floyd. Right. But anyway, R.E.M. busted the gates open, and I knew we were sort of in the storm in the epicenter. So VOL really made its foray into the fray in '92 with Killing Floor. I had released a couple of records before then, but that's when it kind of came, and I could support a band and take them from A to B and win some friends. So that was kind of the long but somewhat 25 words or less.
You're planning your scheme. You're scheming your release. If you're arranging your departure from the mark of the beast. I've been searching through my notebooks. I've been checking through my heart. I've been building in my basement. I've been trying to do my part. Here we go. It's alright, doctor. It's only just my soul.
What I remember being interesting when I first encountered you around that Killing Floor time, and it was probably through Mark Hurd, but you were older. Like you were, like you're saying, you were in your early 30s, and you were playing with younger people, but you brought a level of maturity. And didn't you spend time either as a medic or working in a mental health facility? You were approaching that college rock alternative thing, but with a level of adulthood already under your belt that most of us didn't have.
The cover of Driving the Nails, that picture of the kid with the guitar etched in it says, "This means war." Yeah. Driving the Nails was the record precursor. It was Jugular, Driving the Nails precursor to Killing Floor. I was 38 when that photograph was taken, but I was late to the game. So I felt like I had all this time to make up for it. I became a believer sometime in college, 17, 18 years old. And, the works of people like, Francis Schaeffer and C.S. Lewis figured largely in my sort of integrating, and a small house church in Athens, Georgia, led by a pastor named Alan Dan Orm, who was a professor at the University of Georgia. He had multiple degrees. So it was sort of, Christianity with this sort of intellectual respectability or intellectual integrity, I guess would be the better word,
too.
Was kind of what motivated. Yeah, and exactly. And that's a good word, intellectual curiosity. So, and our little house church was never more than 30 to 50 people on a Sunday, and we had a lot of seekers in that church as well. I was in love with the music of the Athens scene. I loved, bands like Pylon and, of course, R.E.M. So, that's kind of where I thought, well, I can do this. I can play this stuff. But the experience before that in the mid-'80s, I was also working at a mental health facility on the adult unit. It's just a mental health assistant, and sometimes parlaying with the social work configuration inside that hospital, and it brought me up close and personal. And it reinforced the idea that, we have, psychological woes and and physical woes, but for the most part, there's this gaping hole, that is spiritual that only God can fill. And it was never an agenda. I don't think I was trying to push it as an agenda or even at worst propaganda, but it was very much a core of my being. And I try to stress this now just because I realize when I go back and look at old interviews, John, it eluded me back then. But my songs were basically pep talks to myself. I've never written a single song with a particular audience in mind, not Christian, not, Martian, whatever.
Black crow been flying around the house for 7 days. Scarecrows in the cornfield won't make him go away. Members of the Trinity just dropped by his guest. He said, enough of the pleasantries, we got a warrant for your arrest. Mr. Three-Piece on my window, he wants me to butter up his bread. He said, did I lie to you, kid? Well, think about it, I don't know. I said, goodness, Mr. Three-Piece, your heart, it feels like I sinned. That man on the corner, imagine Jesus Christ. Well, one thing that he told me, and I think about this a lot. He said, son, you got to strike while the iron is high. Yes, you gotta strike while the iron is high. I'm gonna strike while the iron is high. Strike to the east, strike to the west, strike north and south, kick it around all best.
When we first encountered each other, it struck me how you seemed very concerned. Like you were aware enough about that Christian music world to not want to get put in it. And we were not part of that. We were like way on the edges of that. Like we touched it sometimes, but the whole purpose of True Tunes was to create an alternate way of thinking about that stuff. So that's why I'm pretty sure it was Mark Hurd and his manager, Dan Russell, that had reached out to me and sent me your stuff and said, you got to hear this guy. And then seeing you at that first time at Cornerstone, then you came and actually played in our store, like before we even had the club. I don't know if you remember, we shoved all the CD racks to the wall and put a stage in, and it was the first time we'd ever done that. It was crazy. And
the True Tunes in Wheaton was great. I still remember those. I think we played there twice. Didn't you guys move upstairs?
Yeah, we had the club upstairs, and you played up there with Over the Rhine, and I think you might have played there a couple times. But I remember that first time in the store where I hired a PA company to come build a stage and put a PA in, and the cops came, and then they ended up just loving it. But you were really concerned, and we understood it because we're like, that's the whole reason we're here. You guys aren't a Christian rock band. You're just a rock band, and you're in the same kind of tradition as a lot of those other Southern rock Americana groups that are just asking these deeper questions. But you seemed to know enough about that world to know not to get on that bus, and that was the thing, is that a lot of people didn't know that, and they just kind of accidentally ended up in the wrong part of town. As it were. So tell me about that. Like, what was that for you? Like, what?
I didn't feel like the songs that I was writing and wanting to write, because I had people, when I first became a Christian, sliding me these records, and they were by people, and I'm not going to mention names, and I just thought, this is not me. This does not groove, and it doesn't rock. It doesn't do any of that stuff. And these would be name bands out of the Christian 60s and 70s. I've since that time gone back and reassessed that statement. I was an arrogant SOB, John. There's no doubt about it. That was an arrogant son of a bitch back in the day about what it was I was doing and how so important it was. And I'm saying that facetiously, but I've met very few artists who are serious artists that don't view their work that same way. There's a certain holy arrogance about it. And so I'll confess to that. But Mark, I can still see Mark standing at the doorway in January with the Killing Floor tapes under his arm. And we had just made this phenomenal record. And we knew it was going to be good. And Mark was going to take it back to LA and mix it. And Dan had just called us, Dan Russell, and said, well, I got you guys booked for the Cornerstone Festival. And I, was a little reticent about it, hung up the phone, didn't make any decisions. I looked at Mark, I said, you know what that conversation was about, don't you? And Mark said, yeah. And I said, well, and I can still see him with that long, British coat on, down below his knees, and his, it's just magnificent, curly hair. And he looked at me and he said, I wouldn't do it. That's what Mark told me. And I knew that was the takeaway from years and years of Mark knocking at the door, trying to expand the horizons of the aesthetics of CCM and just get nothing but heck for it.
Right.
And I thought, well, I don't know. Dan, on the other hand, was like, well, even the church needs to hear the gospel once in a while, so go there and do it. And I thought, well, we've got some friends here. These are good folks. And that's why I continue to go back and play that festival, is really more or less just to make friends with the people who had been so, gracious to us.
So you find these dreams awakening, and they shine to run their course. So much for this thing called life. Tracing it back to, 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 tracing it back to its source.
We'll be back with more of my conversation with Bill Mallonee right after this.
Hello, I'm Matt from Philadelphia, and I'm a Patreon supporter of the True Tunes podcast. One thing I've done, and I know it makes a big difference for True Tunes, is to sign up for the email list at truetunes.com. It might not seem like a big deal, and it's really easy to do, but it's more important than ever for them to be able to communicate with us without having to pay middlemen like Facebook or Instagram. I know that John has some big ideas brewing, and having the ability to let us know is going to be pivotal to the success of those ideas. It's easy to do. Just find the link at the upper right corner of the homepage at truetunes.com, and voila. Make sure to check for the confirmation message and respond. It can also help if you add jjt@truetunes.com to your contacts so that the messages from John don't get caught in your spam filter. Who knows? You might even win a free record, poster, or t-shirt just for being on the list. Thanks.
Hey there. I'm Mark Feldbush, and I'm a Patreon backer of the True Tunes podcast, and I follow and listen to the weekly Spotify Gallery Stage mixtape that John curates for us every week. I get to hear classic artists that I really dig and discover new artists. Every week, usually on Wednesdays, the mix is updated with around 40 songs from brand new releases to deep cuts, and from across a wide range of genres including rock, Americana, indie, gospel, blues, sacred music, soul, and so much more. It's also great to hear a mix that blends up great music that is just good, beautiful, and true without all of the genre and market limitations and boxes I hear everywhere else. You can find the mix on the front page at truetunes.com or on the show notes page for this episode. And if you follow it, it will live there in your Spotify browser and update automatically each week. And don't miss the massive archive list where all previous lists get saved. And as great as Spotify is for music discovery, please support the artists you love once you hear and discover them there. Thanks.
We're back with the True Tunes podcast.
Didn't hear that remark. They say it's hard to hit the moving target. A door can be ajar, perhaps. Please remember, sir, to mind the gap. And I stumble at your bed, and it all goes to my head. But I blow that silver lock with savage kisses. Hit it with a swagger underneath. We're not that strong. We are making it up as we go along.
You guys were so generous to us. You guys were, True Tunes, everybody there was so generous to us. Of course, with Struggleville, having Capricorn there, all the accolades that we got in the press was coming from secular press. So we went from that. From that on, we were getting really good stuff, whether it was, New York Times or Rolling Stone or Spin. I think Spin magazine was still out there working on it.
What was your thinking when you got to that level? Because that gear you hit, especially with Struggleville, before we get into that album, I want to talk about that album. But first, just what kind of philosophy or ethic had you dialed in about the purpose of what you were doing. There was definitely something going on intentionally behind your music. You had something that you were trying to accomplish with that stuff. It felt like you were on a mission. What was that mission?
Well, that's a good question. And just to go back to what I said earlier, I wrote these songs as pep talks to myself. I really didn't know where any of it was going. I had no idea. I know that there was when I was growing up, I really believed, in the Monkees and the TV show and in Hard Day's Night. And I thought, I want a band to be a family. I want a band to be this chemistry. And the Struggleville Band, and a lot of people would be surprised if this wasn't it. It just wasn't it. We were not that we were diametrically opposed to one another, but there was definitely tension in the ranks that came out later on, shortly after the record actually hit. And that's really what I wanted. My purpose was just to find a band, a chemistry of musicians who really, wanted to play and were having fun with it. And it was my way of seeing America. I'd been locked in a son of the South for a long time. So getting in a van and going out and play with your friends, I just thought that's the next step to heaven. Why didn't Dante write that? Band in a van, the fourth book of the trilogy. Anyway, I don't know. I loved it. But I don't think we had a perspective. I know that we hit pretty strong on a couple of modern rock stations, 99X in Atlanta being one of them. I know that the AAA market, adult alternative album, was just starting to blow up, John, and we were on medium to heavy rotation on about 90 out of the 120 stations. That's the kind of information that was coming down from Capricorn Records. So after a while, you start assessing your worth in terms of record sales that week, and they could never get records in the stores. Classic sort of story back then for indie rock bands. They could never get records in the stores and how many spins you got on radio. Well, what I found out, again, on AAA, heavy rotation meant you got played once a day. Heavy rotation on a modern rock station meant you got played 3 or 4 times a day. So you could come up, if you were in heavy rotation, you're getting played 5 to 6 times a week. All of this stuff started to convolute my way of thinking about, why are you doing this? And is the fun going out of it? And the answer is, yes, not the reason I was doing it in the first place. And yes, the fun is starting to go out of it. And this is post-Struggleville, but not by much. Mm-hmm. So I just didn't have an idea of where it was going or what my role was. Did I want to be an astute believer when somebody asked me questions? Yes, I don't think I ever said, I'm not a Christian. I was very upfront about that sort of stuff, but I also said, so now can we talk about the music?
Watching the tempest stir in your soul. Watching the tempest stir in your soul. We are storming the battlements, raising the arguments.
But were there artists and authors and filmmakers, and was there kind of a concept of how art could or should impact individual people or culture in general? What was the sort of guiding ethic or purpose that you had, if any, beyond that Monkees kind of friends in a band family thing? That
I think just bringing the aesthetic, the themes that could be addressed in a rock and roll song, the themes that could be addressed in a pop song. I told journalists that I'm kind of more of a confessional writer. It's sort of a very personalized stuff. People said, "Is there anything between you and the song?" I said, "No, there's not much." And even when it shows up in a third person, there's probably something of me in that third person. So they were pep talks, but I wanted to see the aesthetic of songs, brought up a notch, and that's kind of what I was going for. Mm-hmm. Just in the general scope of what was going out there and being accepted as, music, spiritual or secular or otherwise. So.
Was the Flannery O'Connor God-haunted South thing on your radar? Were you familiar with that idea of...
I was definitely familiar with Flannery's work. Yeah. Flannery O'Connor, Thomas Merton. I discovered, Buechner, or he found me somehow in 1992. I picked up a copy of The Hungering Dark in a Borders bookstore. And it changed my life. I've probably read, 25 of his 30 books. And I miss him. I know we recently lost him, but...
I was going to ask you, I thought that maybe it was either you or Mark around that time that first told me about Buechner, and I think it was Godric that I got first. And that was my second one.
Yeah. What'd you think?
Oh my gosh, it was, it made so much sense. Now I was a kid from the Chicago area and even the farm area in central Illinois, so not a Southern kid, but that idea that you could be Christ haunted, even if you weren't doing something that was specifically Christian, that was in the air in the South. And then I didn't understand that idea of like, why do you mean Christ haunted? Because it really, the Chicago area, it might be Catholic haunted, like there's elements of the culture that felt very Catholic, very ethnically haunted. And there were,
true.
But not as much but then you get down here, and I've lived down here for 15 years, spent some more time, and boy, you get vestiges of, slavery and white supremacy, and you start to see the inherent conflict between the message of the gospel and the function of the church, and you see how that kind of tension over hundreds of years can lead to some lasting psychic scars.
It's horrific, and in just the last 6 to 8 years in this country, we've seen the polarization of those two things that you described, the church and this other thing that claims the church and Christianity, but it was there. It was implicit everywhere. Now, living in Athens, because it was such and kind of growing up and being nurtured in Athens as far as the music went, John, that was a very blue of all blue states, areas to be in. I think in the 60s and 70s. Evil was a little bit more easy to discern when it came out in the social drama of, politics or sociology or the way of life. Now I think it's a little harder to sort of find. It wears many disguises now, I think is what I'm trying to ramble through here. And sometimes maybe even the church, as we've seen it in some of the things that it's embraced or not stepped away from adequately, they might be part of the problem too. So
the king right on down to his minions, tension and greed and strife, driven by opinions. I saw the serpent grinning at his flock. Shadows move across the face of the clock.
One of the things that really struck me, even at the time, but I was young and I don't think I really fully appreciated it as much as I do now when I go back and listen. And now that I've read more O'Connor and some of those authors and looked at some of that poetry, this is not a feel-good thing other than the fact that I could go, oh, I'm not alone in this. Like of this pain I'm feeling, there's community in this suffering.
One of the reasons why I didn't change the way I was writing and was fine with writing from the inside out and saying, well, that's the way it came out and that's what it looks like. A very fine-tuned understanding that the darkness that's in the world is also underneath our skin. And because we're also living in basically the same skin, then what I say is probably going to resonate with somebody. It's like the line out of Vincent, you can't please everyone all the time, but you can sometimes please somebody. And that's as a horrible paraphrase of it. But sometimes it felt to me like there's going to be folks that are going to register with this, whatever themes they're picking up, even if there's just incongruities or a slight deliberate obfuscation in some of these songs. Because my favorite way of putting songs together in some ways was this, I've got 4 or 5 lyric sheets in front of me. This is how Struggleville came about. The song itself, there were 4 or 5 lyric sheets, and I just pulled a stanza from one, a stanza from another, and blocked them all together and let the meaning emerge from it. And that's how that song was written. And I love doing that because it feels like there's something outside of me that's bigger and that's kind of it is directing it in some shape, form, or fashion. So I let those sort of happy mistakes go, or those happy protocols go, and that's kind of the way it is. But we're all living in the same skin. That's the only thing I really wanted to say there. So that's why when we talk about the darkness or the loneliness, or we feel alone, but like you just pointed out, we're not alone. We're all in it together.
So I stole down to the waterfront to escape the desert heat. Oh, what on earth you gotta do around here to try and get yourself a drink? Heard John the Baptist preaching, make way for the King. But if you wanna recognize him, you got try to tell me all your sins. They're building a new gallows, but when you show up on the street, polishing the electric chair, they're gonna give you a front row seat. Heard a sneer outside the garden, salutation so well filled. Welcome all you suckers to Struggleville.
So the Welcome to Struggleville album, tell me about that album, the way those songs came together, and what was it feels like several things really started to click, fall into place.
I had always had a hard time of a problem of keeping a band sort of melded together. Sometimes it was people being involved in other groups that were more successful. Sometimes there were just difficulties with individuals who couldn't, make things work in their lives on a personal level, and so they were available one time and not another. But with Newton Carter, God rest his soul, we lost him a few years back. With Travis McNabb, who was actually on board as one of the first members of that particular lineup, and then Newt knew David Labriere. David's from New Orleans. It's just unbelievable bass player. So we got David in. The bass player that we'd had previously had developed some pretty severe carpal tunnel, but all that galvanized in a short period of time, and it was storming. I had this new batch of songs that had, and they took them in a different direction, to tell you the truth. I mean, there were songs on there. I don't have the actual set list in front of me right now, but they were far more funky and grooving oriented than anything that I'd written. Most of my stuff in it was electric, was sort of Neil Youngish. I was still playing acoustic guitar almost all the time. I had electric guitars, but I didn't play them in the Struggleville band very much. I was still ramping up with the acoustic and playing it, really loud and a little bit of compression on it, and just kind of, being in your face with it. I didn't need the electric guitar then. So that's kind of where it went, and we were starting to sell out shows in Atlanta. We were playing places like the Cotton Club, Eddie's Attic. We were selling out shows. I thought, man, there's something going on here. Anyway, that's the band that wound up in Austin, Texas in 92, and we got signed. It was that simple. It was like, well, 3 or 4 months later, we're in the studio with Jim Scott. Jim was working on the Tom Petty's Wildflowers record with Rick Rubin. And they had gotten 6 months into the record, and Rick told Tom, I can't imagine anybody ever saying this to Tom Petty, but the story that I got from Jim Scott, Rick told Tom Petty to go home and write. He said, we've got 6 good songs, Tom, go home and write 6 more. And I think, well, I'm sure he had given you 20 songs and they were all killer. Right. So we got Jim for a few months because Tom was home writing new songs. And Jim came to Atlanta, and we went into Triclop Studio, and that's where we started. That's where we banged out the basic tracks, and we came back to Athens and did the overdubs. And like I said, that band, they infused those songs with more of a rock and groove sort of thing. And it was amazing. And in fact, I told Newt when it was time to do the vocals, I said, I think you guys need to find another singer. I'm not sure I can sing these songs. And it was like, come on, you can do this. You wrote them. So there's a couple little places, even on the Struggleville record, I think that's just a little out of my range. But I was still being belabored by the fact that, if you could sing a song in G, but you can't hear it on the monitors, then put it in A and just bust a nut. And you're going to hear yourself. That was my ridiculous philosophy about approaching songs and how to sing them. So there's a couple little moments on that record I think, I don't know, really, I wish that would go by quicker. But anyway, it is what it is, and it's what we worked with, and then we got in the van and slowly but surely, things started to fall apart.
Welcome to Struggleville.
It was a great ride.
It was prophetic at the same time.
Station in Birmingham. Heard you needed me back in Athens town. But the darling, I would be the last to know.
Now, this might be kind of a sensitive question, so feel free to say, hey, don't ask that. But I want to throw it out there and give you a chance to respond to it. am I right to assume that part of $100 price tag to back this, when we see that, a lot of vinyl things like this are in the $50 range, that's given us a chance to contribute towards your cost of just being alive and living? Like, this is your job, this is your work, and there's some income for you and your cost of living. And
yeah, I mean, that is part of it, but that's not the center of it. I mean, two things. The company that we're going with on this thing is the best company in America right now. There's really only two that are doing vinyl like this. And Gotta Groove Records, I mean, I'd be glad to show anybody the budget. I'm basically in the role, the chair of being the executive producer for this thing. And I can tell you right now that whatever comes in, probably 2/3 of that budget is going straight out the door to record. The record is one thing. The rediscover, because we haven't mentioned this, there was a rehearsal tape that Jim Scott recorded with us on 2-inch 24 track. And we had 8 songs that we went through, and I think there's one song that we did twice because we changed the key in it. But so there's that coming out with it. That's been digitized. It's got to be remastered and then also printed up in a CD format. So they're not just getting the double 180-gram album. And the other thing that's great about that is the record's 48 minutes long. But to take that and put it and spread it across 2 albums means the grooves are massive. It means you're going to get information. If you're an audiophile, it's going to be an incredibly, hugely stereophonic record. They're going to love it. And they did such a good job on Killing Floor. I thought, that record, I still have people writing me saying, I'm listening to Killing Floor like I heard it the first time. It sounds different and better because they got the vinyl. And I realize vinyl is not everybody's cup of tea, but the $100 price tag is more than fair given the double LP. It's 2 records, folks, not one. It's not just crammed. It's not, 50 minutes of music crammed into, 2 faces. It's spread out. It's huge that way. It has to be remastered for vinyl to improve its quality. And then they're getting the rehearsal tape. And yeah, sitting in the executive producer chair for 3 months is going to take some coin.
And I think that with this stuff, a lot of folks just don't have a chance to look behind the curtain and see what the real costs are. The other thing is we forget that this is somebody's job, and that part of this is it's reasonable for people to get paid for what they're doing. And
it is a lot of money, but if you're an audiophile and that's what you're paying for. The other thing is just a scarcity factor. I mean, you can go down the list. I'm not Bruce Springsteen ordering 10,000 records. I'm Bill Mallonee ordering 300. Right. It's like, they're going to pay for that. So, come and get it, because when they're gone, they're gone.
Everybody got a secret that they've been sitting on. The candid among you see theirs feels like an atom bomb. These things I know are delicate, could do you some harm. Got to have some friends working on the bomb squad, working on the bomb squad. I said I know the passion and the suffering and pain. Oh, if you give me an honest minute, I'll explain everything.
I just distanced myself from it for well over a decade. I mean, I'd hear a track here and there. And then somebody called up and said, hey, did you know John Mellencamp did a version of the song itself? And I looked at that and realized he hadn't given credit to anybody. He just sang it and stuck it up on his, I don't know what his management does, but anyway, there was no communication. Right. Anyway, he did this version of the song. I thought, well, let's go back and revisit the record for what it is. And it still feels relevant, intense, and it's got energy in it that I love. I thought, well, that's me. That's us. That was that band. That chemistry was there.
I guess my last question about that specific record, when you go back and do this, is it enjoyable? Is it painful? Is it, what are the emotions you're feeling as you go through and revisit these things? That's
a great question. And I'm so glad you asked it, because I have been aware over the last week when I've been, out to the post office or, the little co-op or something to grab milk and bread. I've been very aware that there's a bittersweet quality to it. There's nothing that you can freeze frame that lasts. It's like, it feels more like a grace now. And I'm not trying to wax, uber religious on this, John, but it feels more like there were some stars aligning, and I realized that we like to think that we're controlling the vertical and horizontal of our lives, but we're not. We're doing our best. And this, when I went back and listened to that record, I thought, Bill, everything that lined up to make that record happen, whether it was Mark Hurt in front of it or, Fingerprint and Dan Russell, the studios we went into, Jim Scott, I mean, he was working with just some great people. I thought, how did this happen? Because 3 months ago it wasn't happening. And all of a sudden the stars aligned and here we are. And you just start realizing that the thing that you're listening to is bigger than yourself. And the project is bigger than you. So there's a little bittersweet quality about it. I thought, well, should I have stayed with this a little bit longer? I don't know. It feels more like a grace, and that there was something outside making this thing come together and come forth the way it did.
Only heard a few stories, I've only seen a few works. Tractor paints on plywood, covered up with Bible verse. You see so much, see not much at all. But we're treading down serpents and we're breaking the fall. And picture's worth 8,000 words. What I've seen is what I've heard. The image rides and flickers on the screen. Distance grows wide between the glory and the dream.
You've had these distinct, they seem to me to be fairly distinct phases of Vigilantes of Love, and then into your last 20 years or so as a solo troubadour. You've got those, the Struggleville Band era. You've got the Kenny Hudson and Jake Bradley era, the Kevin Hoyer and Chris Bland era. So these chapters in the book, that kind of unfolded. Tell me about the distinctions and the things that you learned, sort of the markers that happened along the way, and the marks that they left on you, each of those things, and how that affected you as an artist and that kind of thing.
The record after Struggleville was Blister Soul. That was more of a studio record in a lot of ways because the band hadn't really galvanized whoever was going to be in it, but I had these songs. And we walked into John Keene's studio. John played guitar. I had from the Capricorn radio guy, Jeff Cook, he said, Bill, if you can get us a kind of a ramped up electric guitar version of Real Downtown, which is already on, Mark Hurd and I recorded that for Killing Floor. If you can get us a ramped up version of that, that's going to be the song that Modern Rock Station wants to hear. And we did. And but John played electric on it. I played some electric on the album, but that was the song that broke it open. But there was no band. There was no real band to go out and do it. Chris Donahue's incredible bass player, and I know he's a huge, Nashville session player, and he's great. Chris got, a nod from somebody to come and play on their record and move to Nashville, so he did. So we were without bass and guitar for a minute there. And I just don't think that the Blister Soul Band, that what we went out with, John, I don't think it was very top notch. It certainly couldn't hold a candle to Welcome to Struggleville Band. So what I was learning, and Mark Hurd and I had this talk. I said, you learn how to be a writer, you learn how to fine hone that and tune it, and then you kind of learn how to be a band leader. But all that other stuff of how to work with labels and contracts and management and attorneys, you're playing on their field all the time. And I was starting to feel like I was drowning like, I can't keep this up. We're not really protected. We don't really have a manager who is assertive or aggressive enough to get us in the right places. So we never got out of the van. And most people think, oh, that sure sounds glorious. And outside of a few festivals in places like Chicago, Philadelphia, Atlanta, maybe Nashville, we could sell at the 12th and Porter, but those weren't big shows. And we certainly weren't playing, in front of 500 people a night. That's when we started to jockey for position about trying to get the band in front of somebody that was filling up, a small theater, 2,000 to 3,000 people. Well, those bands we were told those bands that we were going for were bands like Sunvolt and Wilco, Jayhawks, people like that. And we didn't have any conduits into any of those bands. And what we found out from their management is those groups were trying to open for the Pettys and the Springsteens and the Mellencamp's. It's like, oh, I see how this works. So they're trying to get a leg up on their careers too by playing in front of more people. And I remember we talked about this in the band a good bit. Kenny and Jake and Kevin and I talked about it a lot. It's like, I think we're consigned to playing in front of, maybe 40 to 75 people a night if we're lucky. And but just think about that. And they were like, oh no, we're all in this together. And they were. Kenny was in the band for 2.5 years. We made a lot of music. He was part of the Roof of the Sky equation. And that was a great record. I think that record probably deserves to be on vinyl as well, because it was the precursor to Buddy Miller and Audible Sigh. And it has just a grit to it that is kind of lost on Audible Sigh in favor of a more radio-friendly Americana. But I love that record, and there's good songs on it.
Starts to go backward and fades in a shimmer off that western rim. The path of ice that forms from this spot stretching southward. It's rumored here it got the best of him.
But I was learning, that, you just have to go with the moment. And I felt like the songs were getting better. I was becoming more proficient on electric guitar. Moved that up to, Slow Dark Train with Chris and Tom. And that was me playing electric guitar for the entire set. I think maybe I had a couple acoustics on stage, but I'm not sure I played them every night.
Yes, you're a big ship. Loaded down with a whole lot of baggage and freight and lots of luxury liner. Temperatures dropping. Radio's dead. Taking on water, going down fast. Yes, under the breakers.
That record came out sounding more like a garage record, and the label they didn't like it. I don't think they really went for it.
Yeah. But you're saying that basically each of those phases, as opposed to it feeling at the time like a chapter, you were just responding to the circumstances as they flew into your face.
Yeah, I think I had learned how to write, John, for the people that I was working around, the people who were with me. I knew how to kind of take it in that direction. And, there wasn't a country rock lick that Kenny Hudson couldn't play. And he was a mandolin player. He was becoming more and more proficient on pedal steel. It's like, this guy is amazing. Jake, stunningly good guitar player now, and a good bass player, just a really solid bass player. Kevin came out of the post-punk rock and roll thing, and so he understood it. It was an unbeatable band. So this unbeatable band that makes a record with Buddy Miller, and we have, star power coming from Brady Blade, Emmylou Harris, Julie Miller, Tammy Rogers, on violin, all of those folks. It's like, Phil Madeira, I'm sorry, Phil, I didn't mean to leave you out there. Yeah, you're all over this thing. It's like, how can a label not take this record somewhere?
And some will shake off the sloth of faithlessness, while others simply languish in their sleep. Me, I just fight to stay awake. Yeah, I've always had this black cloud, always had this black cloud, always had this black cloud over me.
The label not only couldn't take it somewhere, they folded before it ever came out. Enter this gentleman, this golden heart named John Thompson, who decides to, did you press up 1,000 copies of this thing? Is that what it was at Cornerstone?
I gave you 1,000 and I kept 1,000 and I paid you for the 1,000.
And they were gone in 3 days at Cornerstone.
Yeah, right.
You gave it at Sea-Legs. It would have never gotten off the launch pad. It would have never gotten off the launch pad had it not been for you guys doing that.
But it was an album that I happened to luck out because only a handful of those CD advances. Pioneer was the label at that point. And they sent it out, and I got one of the advance copies. And then when I called them about setting up the feature, the label was gone. And so I used that CD and called you with the pirate idea of, hey, if you get permission to release this, I have an idea of how we can help you put it out. At least a stopgap. You could then, you do whatever you're going to do later, but at least we could get you copies so that you could put some money in the bank and get something rolling, get a tour going. This is like a flawless album. It has everything on it, and then everything falls apart again.
And Americana was blowing up. I think Sunvolt and I think Uncle Tupelo had split. Jeff and Jay had gone their separate ways. Right. It's like, how is this not going to happen? Well, there are gatekeepers out there, and one of those gatekeepers was at a major journal, and they told Buddy they didn't think the band counted. That's what they said. And I know they're in denial about it, but I heard it straight out of the lips of Buddy. He was on the phone with one of the editors. Do you only need one magazine to make it happen? Well, no, but this one was the country Bible of the time.
It was no depression.
We don't
have to mince words.
It was.
And and the thing is about niches and small things. If you were in the gospel world or if you were in the jazz world, like back then there wasn't a social media network where there was 50 ways or 100 ways or 500 ways to get information out.
True.
There were gatekeepers that really held the fort down for each of those genres, and they were the main one. And if they just decided that this wasn't the thing, then you couldn't get through to the tastemakers in that place.
It was weird. It was really weird, and it was discouraging. And I remember walking around. I went out of Buddy's house and just walked around the block, and I remember the lump in the throat. I'm not sure I shed tears about it, but I remember saying, I don't know how I'm going to tell these guys this.
How much of this was meant to be? How much the work of the devil? How far can one man's eyes really see in these days of toil and trouble? How much of this is failing flesh? How much course of retribution? My, how loudly we plead our innocence long after we've made our contribution.
The plus side of the equation is about 3 minutes later, we're being asked to come to the UK and play some pretty big tours, and there's this voice over there. He comes to Nashville once in a while. He's an old guard radio announcer named Whispering Bob Harris. Mm-hmm. And Bob Harris took that song because he was an Emmylou fan, and he fell in love, not just with the whole record, not just with that song, but with the whole record, to the point where we're playing The Mean Fiddler in places like that in London, and then going up to Bob's radio station on BBC Two. He has 3 million listeners across the land, and we're talking with him about music and Buddy and Steve Earle and all kinds of folks. We're blowing up in the UK. Right after that record came out, it was because you gave it at C-Legs, we still could not find an American deal for it. It was still being shopped to no avail, which is why it came out in 4 separate configurations. I mean, what do you do? We even went back in Buddy's studio and recorded. And I think Kenny came back and just thought, I've had enough of it. I can't do this. That's why there are extra songs on the 21 song version, because I thought, man, this record is guitar heavy. I've got to go back in and do something. So we ended up recording 3 or 4 more songs. One of them was Solar System. And that became yet another version of Audible Sigh. But we just couldn't find a major label to take it. So that's it. Finally ended up being released again on Compass Records.
Come in here and have a taste. Yeah, what's one more hopeless case? When your shortwave dies and there's no one to listen, when the stars going cold in your solar system.
And so then you have the era after that with the sort of more pop version, the power pop kind of thing with
Summershine,
And then pretty much the band era of Vigilantes kind of winds down, and for the last 20 years it's Bill and all the voices in his head. it's you as the solo new version of a troubadour.
I don't want to leave Paste Music for a moment. There started a label, and they released Locket Full of Moonlight, Fetal Position, and Perfume Letter. And I think that Summershine and Perfume Letter are the 2 most ambitious records I've done. If you're just looking at the indie rock pop sort of thing, very neo-psychedelic in a lot of ways. Those records are super ambitious, and we were really fortunate to have Tom Lewis, who's an Athens engineer, be part of that because he understood it. I mean, I think Tom breathes Pet Sounds. He's that kind of producer. But he actually helped us craft it, all the mellotron parts, the orchestrated string parts that make it sound very, Strawberry Fields Forever-ish kind of thing. Those are the sounds, like you pointed out earlier, those are the sounds in my head.
Said I'll show you a room, but I don't have the key. Then I love traveling light. And if you let go your burdens and hold on to me, we're both gonna be alright. Yeah, we're both gonna be
More with Bill Mallonee after this.
Hello, I'm Matt from Philadelphia, and I'm a Patreon supporter of the True Tunes podcast. One thing I've done, and I know it makes a big difference for True Tunes, is to sign up for the email list at truetunes.com. It might not seem like a big deal, and it's really easy to do, but it's more important than ever for them to be able to communicate with us without having to pay middlemen like Facebook or Instagram. I know that John has some big ideas brewing, and having the ability to let us know is going to be pivotal to the success of those ideas. It's easy to do. Just find the link at the upper right corner of the homepage at truetunes.com and voila. Make sure to check for the confirmation message and respond. It can also help if you add jjt@truetunes.com to your contacts so that the messages from John don't get caught in your spam filter. Who knows? You might even win a free record, poster, or t-shirt just for being on the list. Thanks.
Hey there, I'm Mark Feldbush and I'm a Patreon backer of the True Tunes podcast, and I follow and listen to the weekly Spotify Gallery Stage mixtape that John curates for us every week. I get to hear classic artists that I really dig and discover new artists. Every week, usually on Wednesdays, the mix is updated with around 40 songs from brand new releases to deep cuts and from across a wide range of genres including rock, Americana, indie, gospel, blues, sacred music, soul, and so much more. It's also great to hear a mix that blends up great music that is just good, beautiful, and true without all of the genre and market limitations and boxes I hear everywhere else. You can find the mix on the front page at truetunes.com or on the show notes page for this episode. And if you follow it, it will live there in your Spotify browser and update automatically each week. And don't miss the massive archive list where all previous lists get saved. And as great as Spotify is for music discovery, please support the artists you love once you hear and discover them there. Thanks.
Welcome back to the True Tunes podcast.
Well, earthly powers fail you, your body's strength is sapped. That little break you were looking for never fell into your lap. Yeah, the voice is what you trusted, but the eyes had final say. Honey, you still got the devil left to pay. Still got the devil left to pay.
Basically, the solo troubadour era, this last 20 years or so, is the sound after the wheels have all fallen off, and the wheels being all of the other people, the members, this whatever it is, 15, 20 people that have kind of come and gone through this institution, this school of hard knocks of Vigilantes of Love. They're all gone, and you're the one that's left, and that's why it's Bill Mallonee and not called Vigilantes of Love. It's just you and your guitar.
But they're not just folk records. I mean, because I don't want your listeners who don't know me from Adam's House Cat, I don't want them to think that these records, even though we don't have a big rock record production, they're two guitar, bass, and drum records with lots of overlay of pedal steel. Rags of Absence is a brilliant record, and I think this new one is that way. But I like I said, I'm writing 75 to 100 songs a year, sometimes more. And I've just got to, only get one or two swings at it. So I'll put out those records. And I've been fortunate that all the years of, driving the concept of Vigilantes of Love and the van until the wheels fell off, of driving the concept until the wheels fell off. I was fortunate to find people out there that still stay in touch, like the music matters. And I'm grateful for that. Again, I didn't engineer that. I didn't keep massive organized mailing lists or anything. I just put the word out, and somehow, the puppies show up at the door for a snack. I'm grateful. I am grateful beyond measure for it. And there are people who are astute. My fans are pretty musically astute, I think. They don't just listen to a particular approach. But I'm proud of the records. I taught myself bass guitar. I learned how to play lap steel a couple of years ago. So I'm trying to throw those variables in the mix. And lo and behold, what I found is that, gosh, an electric guitar part, and I've gotten better at that too, it can actually converse with the lap steel. So there's going to be these places where they miss and harmonize. And I love it. To me, I'm pointing over here, the studio is right behind me. It still feels like the kid. I still feel like the kid who's skipping school to learn how to play Black Dog. He's 18 years old, and that's what it still feels like. It still feels exciting and new.
You're out on the mean streets. No coins in your pocket and no shoes on your feet. However the die is cast, baby, this too shall pass. Nothing here is ever meant to last.
It seemed kind of like the theme that I caught on this album. It opens with a prayer and closes with a song. What opens with the prayer and closes with a song? I mean, church services do, but in some ways lives do. You know, like I was thinking about how my grandfather passed away a few years ago, and we were there at his bedside, and he was long past the capacity to actually speak. But when Michelle and I were singing for him, if we stopped singing at one point, his hand would start shaking, like he was still telling, keep singing. And our family just had and everybody gathered around his bed and sang songs. And I just thought,
very sweet.
It opens with a prayer and closes with a song, like a prayer, like a baptism, a dedication of a baby, and then you're singing at a funeral. And I'm thinking, so it is a life. One of the songs that jumped out, I wanted to get your take on and see if I'm right, but Faith-Seeking Understanding. That seems like a song that could have gone on almost any Vigilantes or Bill Mallonee project ever. That seems to be almost like the bumper sticker you could have put on any one of your guitar cases you've ever owned. So tell me about that, how that fits into this theme and this concept of opening with a prayer and closing with a song. And
yeah, the song is Cave In, and then the parenthetical is Faith Seeking Understanding, or the other way around, or Understanding Seeking Faith. And to me, the front end of that, is it Aquinas? Was it Thomas Aquinas that gave us that? I may be out of my league here. But anyway, I think it was Aquinas. It's Faith Seeking Understanding. But the or other way around was my addition to it. And that was to take the brutalities and atrocities of life, force you to find the faith, to find God behind the veil. This is what Buechner was writing about, the absence of God. How do you find God in his supposed absence? That's a huge theme in my work. But the song takes its specific reference point and starting point, cave in a coal mining cave in, which is another theme that I've written a lot about. And, the loss of lives. And, does anybody recognize the deserted cities of the heart? This is the foreman who's actually singing the song, who has to take, the body count, as he calls the roll, and the people that aren't coming up. It's a grim song in a lot of ways. I mean, it is, but it has more of a Tom Waitsy kind of bluesy thing to it that I had never put in any of my songs. But that song is kind of a showcase piece. So after the acoustic opener, that's where it goes, which is a pretty heavy-handed song. I'd love to have a band that could play that. It would just be great to be out on the road with a band that was replicating that entire record. But that's the answer to your question. Faith-seeking understanding, which is kind of what we're always about in many ways. Lord, why this, and what about that, and when are you going to act, and but the other way around is the harsh brutalities of life that we have to walk through, and then wake up and still say, hey, you know what? I still believe he is in control, And we go right back to the start of this conversation. That was the transcendent moment. There were transcendent moments that I heard in Beatles music and in Roger McGuinn's 12-string guitar. That was my first religious experience. And those are the things I think that should motivate artists. Like, well, if you have a hunger for the transcendence, you should pick up a guitar or open a keyboard and start playing, because you'll find it there. you will find it in some shape, form, or fashion of something coming out of here, and it will be a conduit for something transcendent.
There's just something about that is essentially spiritual and emotional, and that faith-seeking understanding, because God gave us brains as well. Like it's not like we're mindless in our faith.
Now let there be light, let there be light. No cities left in the dark. Yeah, but no one seems to recognize these deserted cities of the heart. Words stretched out to the breaking point. It's all wrecked up 3 miles down. Faith seeking understanding, or the other way around. Hand me that dusty clipboard, the saddest of all days. Just answer me by saying present, or let silence have her say. Better tell it with tears, better speak it with sighs. You never know, you never know, you never know if saying goodbye. You never know.
There's a lot of mirror looking and like you call it, confessional, about your own failures, your own struggles. So just on a functional level as a songwriter, is your craft evolving, changing? What are you doing to as a craftsman to kind of make it exciting for you to keep doing this stuff?
Well, I think I'm singing differently. That's a good question, and I wanted to get to this, but this question is perfect for it. I think I'm singing in a different way. I'm singing in a more softer way rather than just blowing everything straight through, a strong voice trying to get over monitors. I'm singing with far more, a soulfulness in the voice that wasn't there before, and I'm singing my own harmonies now. Which they'll come out, sounding like, Neil Young singing with himself or Keith Richards with Mick. There's a certain calculated roughness to it. It's not that the notes are wrong, but they're not going to be Pro Tooled into perfection. And I love that. I think that's what makes it sound like Brian Quincy Newcomb, who we all know and love, paid me a huge compliment when the Lands and Peoples record came out, and then again on Rags of Absence. He said, Bill, I don't know what it is. He said, I know you're playing all the instruments on this, but it sounds like there's a band in the room.
Look at all of the diamonds. Look at all of the rust. Look at all of the boom. And look at all of the bust. All of the vistas of golden eternities. It's just pulling on boots, rolling up your sleeves. Hide me in the darkness, all that's lost and found. Hide me in the darkness.
So I get excited about that when I do hear a more escalated demo that's more than just me, a guitar and a voice. When it starts to mature and take shape, it's like, I think I know where this is going, so anyway.
And then sometimes you're sending files, like you're able to get Chris Bland to play on this, and a VOL.
Yep. Chris delivered great parts. Bill Pratt,
who also played with The Wayside, I think before he played with you.
Oh, good.
He played with us, yeah, and he played pedal steel with the Cornerstone and played on some demos.
He is amazing.
So you send a song to him, he can play with it in New England and send it back to you. So that's something we couldn't do back in the day as easily. But
that's true. Yeah, there's definitely some great takeaways there.
Right.
A friend of mine who I was in a band with in high school, a guy named Mark Consul, played guitar on Motherlode and on another song, actually on the Chris Bland song that Chris plays bass on. And it's just perfect parts. Mark's a great guitar player. He's semi-professional, but he plays a lot in Atlanta. We were in a high school band together. And I thought, well, Mark, are you still playing? He said, heck yeah, man, I'm still playing. You know, I got an R&B review band with 3 girl singers, and you know, I still play. So anyway, Mark contributed. So yeah, the file sharing thing has definitely started to work. So.
Is touring completely out of the question at this point, or is it just on pause?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, Lord willing, and I mean that, Lord willing, we'll get back there in some shape, form, or fashion. I don't know if anybody wants to listen, but it'll be fun to take a swing at it. I think it'd be great in some shape, form, or fashion if Jake and Kenny and Kevin and I could get back together and go out and do the Audible Side record or something like that, and maybe with the idea of moving into another album. I'd love to play with those guys again. But I know everybody's busy, so we'll see what happens.
You must know they speak in murmurs whenever you're around. Grab your dry goods and staples and get out of town. No explanation, not to anyone. It all opens with a prayer here, but it closes with a song. You say, all I ever had were these tumbleweed dreams. Sometimes even those see you through. Tumbleweed dreams. Tumbleweed dreams blowing through. Yeah, tumbleweed dreams blowing through.
I want to kind of bring this in for a landing with some conceptual, a little bit more philosophical, overarching questions.
Tug on that beard a little bit.
After 30 plus years of this, how has your concept of the potential or even the utility, what music can accomplish in an individual's heart or mind evolved? What do you think music can actually do for us and in us?
I think what a songwriter could do is give, and what music can do is it gives us a nomenclature to define and excavate our own human experience. And I don't think that's as hard as it sounds. I think it crosses all sorts of boundaries. It doesn't have to be the American experience. It could be just humanity's experience. If you're doing the job right, it could be a song about, loving and losing. It could be a song about, a political song. That's something, Joe Strummer would be proud of. It could be a Leonard Cohen song that has a lot of, poetic obfuscation in it, but he's drawing from multiple images to pull out things. I think if you're doing your work right, then the thing that you've put out there that came from the core of this thing, seeking faith with understanding, or seeking transcendence, some sort of, to me, transcendence in our experience of it, when it's spoken of, it's a way of verifying that this world around us, it's not just this, there's more to it than that. And that seems to me to be the biggest philosophic question. Is there life beyond the grave? Even a contingency of people in the Corinthian church, Paul had to spend a good bit of ink, a couple of letters trying to straighten them out on the fact, wait a minute, there is a resurrection, and that's the only reason I'm out here. It's always resurrection. And I can't tell you what it's like, but I can give you some examples. The seed that goes into the ground is not going to look like what went into the ground. It's going to come up something bigger than life. And that there are little nuances of that can come out in good written songs. And that's what I think would be a quick answer to your question. But I still believe in it. I think it's one of the reasons why, in more of a grandiose way, I think it's one of the reasons why U2 does what they do. I think Bono just absolutely believes, if I say what I want to say in the right way, then it's going to affect change. And he's right. And people do listen, and they do take their cues. And people who would never think about unpacking, a pop song that's as challenging as some of their material is, all of a sudden they're thinking about things they've never thought before, or maybe they had been told to think about it before, maybe in Sunday school class or from the pulpit, but music, because of its conduit and because of the venue, literally and figuratively, that it plays itself out in, we all, plug into something and we put it on our head and we listen to it, and we listen to these messages and these yearnings and these strivings. And that's powerful. And when you've got somebody as eloquent and as astute and as cool, as Bono, then I mean, how can you go wrong? Is he a minister? Is he a pop musician? What is he? Well, he's all of the above. He's a human. He's a human that's tapped into the depths of what it means to be a human. And that's kind of how I see, my thing working out on a much, much smaller level. But that's what I try to do when I pick up the guitar. So.
I heard Billie Holiday singing on the radio. Find yourself down on your luck. Baby, you can help yourself, but please don't take too much. Yeah, baby, my heart is broken, and it feels just like the first time. So if my heart is broken, just believe my spirit's not far behind. Just believe my spirit's not far behind.
I'm just not ready to give up on the idea that we might not be able to change someone's mind in a few minutes with a single song, but over the span of a conversation and a relationship, we can change the tenor, we can change the temperature, we can influence and massage a situation so that somebody might have their heart reoriented. I've seen that happen for good and ill. And if it wasn't possible, I don't think we would have seen the civil rights era and the way that music influenced people to start to think about civil rights differently, and in the 60s, the way that it started to open up people to think about the Vietnam War and different things. We need the conversation to change.
John, you've nailed it. This is so true. The only word that I want to introduce, and it's the concept that's gone on because of this very thing, that we have in front of us, is sometimes the truth of what's under our skin has been reduced to agendas. And we are so polarized that my question in my darker moments is, are we even able to hear anyone anymore? Are we able to hear the other side of the aisle? Or, and it's a concern of mine because I don't know that we've got the vocabulary or the nomenclature to describe something that's in the middle, or an amalgamation of the two. I think we're losing our ability in that to compromise, to make allowances, to appreciate. Do I think there's a message, that needs to be heard? I do, but I don't think it needs to be an agenda to the point where all of a sudden we are lacking the compassion of Christ. How would Jesus do it is still a very valid ideal to approach. When we're relating to the world, but the world isn't the world anymore. The world is it's as big as our backyard. It's our family, it's our kids, it's our colleagues. How do we register this stuff out there and then begin to see, the Jesus that's inside of them? That's a huge thing. Even if it's a part of that, I'm a person I disagree with about things. How do we see it? I fail at it a lot, but the internet has become a tool of polarization in so many ways. I don't know how we step around it and say, wait a minute, that's not what I said. Let me make sure I heard you right. These are the kind of time we need to take with people to listen and to really learn how to listen, and then hopefully they hear us in response. It all feels very, very liquid right now. I think we're in a different era. In some ways, it's harder to identify where the problems are and where the evil is coming from and what is tripping us up.
But music helps us learn how to listen better.
If we use it right, it sure does. Yeah, I don't know that it's just, in fact, at the end of the day, it might be the last word, that we live by, that we use as the thing that kind of moves us on.
Well, I hate to end on a sober note, but there are spirits who won't survive. A world of meanness and cruelty, they won't make it out alive. And the world an olive branch, and yourself one too. Who cares if anyone's looking? Who cares if everyone misses that beautiful sight? You're a true burning bright. Who cares if anyone's looking? Who cares if everyone misses that? You're true and burning
We don't usually do this with a list this long, but I told you earlier I would let you know which songs we used on this episode, and I want to take a minute here and sort of back announce these because it's amazing to me how rich Bill's VOL and solo catalog is, and Bruce pored over the entire catalog and chose over 40 clips this time. So I'm going to run down that list, and again, you can find this whole list on the show notes page, but I just wanted to acknowledge the riches that we had to listen to on this. In our opening segment from Bill Mallonee's solo work, we heard You Give It All Your Heart, Baby I Was Lucky to Get Out of There Alive, The World's Tip Jar, and then from VOL we heard Real Downtown, It's Not Bothering Me, Resume, Runaway Train, Welcome to Struggleville, Could Be a Lot Worse, and a little tag of Real Downtown. And that was just the opening segment. In the first set, we heard, again from Bill, Shadow Canyon and You Old Cow Puncher, and then from VOL, we heard Who Knows When the Sunrise Will Be, Double Cure, Losing It, It's All Right Doctor, Strike While the Iron's Hot, and Tracing It Back to Its Source, all again just in the first set. On the second set, from Bill Mallonee's solo work, we heard Face of the Clock, we heard from VOL, Making It Up As We Go Along, Tempest, Welcome to Struggleville. We got a special sneak peek listen to just a little bit of one of those rare rehearsal sessions that those who get the Struggleville vinyl reissue will hear of Last to Know. Then we also heard I Can Explain Everything, Glory in the Dream, Real Downtown, To the Roof of the Sky, Taking on Water, Black Cloud O'er Me, Resplendent, Solar System, and Galaxy, all on set 2. On set 3, it was mostly Bill Mallonee's solo material with You've Still Got the Devil Left to Pay, Nothing Here Was Ever Meant to Last, Till Your Heart Got in the Way, Cave In, Hide Me in the Darkness, Tumbleweed Dreams, If My Heart is Broken, and Trimmed and Burning. And then in the Soapbox feature, we heard VOL's Skin, and from Bill's solo project, we heard the exclusive instrumental mix of Best Seat in the Room, which you have also heard on other episodes of the show. Thank you, Bill, for that. You can find most of this music at BillMalloneeMusic.com, where he has vinyl and CDs, and there's a link on that page to his Bandcamp page, where all of it, or at least most of it, is available digitally as well. You can find this whole list, including the names of which versions we used, some of them are quite rare, and which albums each song can be found on the show notes page at truetunes.com/VOL. Thanks for unlocking the vaults for us, Bill, and thanks, Bruce, for gathering all of these great clips. I'll be right back with some final thoughts right after this. True Tunes is on the road. I've been to Indiana, California, Tennessee, Iowa, and Illinois so far, and we are currently looking at opportunities around the country. These conversations have been a lot of fun, with me bringing a turntable and some records and a guitar, and often finding artists or other special guests to join me. I've also done songwriting workshops, music business clinics, and even some conversations about how we can slow ourselves down and listen to music more carefully, more thoughtfully, and yes, more spiritually. So, from auditoriums to small groups, there's kind of something for everyone. You can follow all of the action at truetunes.com/events, and if you would be interested in having me come speak in your neck of the woods, drop me a line at jjt@truetunes.com and let me know. I'm also excited to be aligning with the Porchlight Network for house shows. Porchlight is a growing network of house show venues around the country, and you can learn more at porchlight.art. So, for house shows, look me up at Porchlight. For schools, venues, churches, or other opportunities, just connect with me directly. And hopefully, I'll be seeing you out there in person. As I pull out my soapbox to wrap this up, I'm thinking about one of my favorite Vigilantes of Love lyrics. It comes from the song Skin from their 1995 album Blister Soul. Using Vincent van Gogh as a jumping-off point, Mallonee contemplates the solitary, frustrating path of the artist, especially an artist prone to self-destruction and introspection on the search for the deeper path.
Sometimes you can't please everyone. Sometimes you can't please anyone at all. You sew your heart onto your sleeve and wait for the axe to fall.
painters, writers, musicians, artists of all kinds can take up the call, can dig deep and offer up something beautiful or ugly but true to the world. But then it's usually about the marketplace, and a different set of principles kick in. You, as the artist, wait for the chips to fall, and it seems like they rarely fall the right way for the lifers. But like Vincent, and maybe Bill, and certainly me, you probably have to be a little bit crazy to keep at it. We'd all probably be more successful if we simply let the market be our guide. Just make the kinds of paintings, books, and music that will sell, forgetting those hard stories, those deeper truths churning in our guts. Just paint a pretty picture or write a catchy hook and cash the checks. And sometimes the planets seem to align. The circumstances all seem to line up, and we manage to craft art that is beautiful, meaningful, and somehow commercially viable. But someone at the label steals the money, or the label shuts down, or the band breaks up, and the axe falls. Remember, Starry Night, Van Gogh's famous painting, is based on the view he could see from his room at a mental asylum. He voluntarily checked himself in there shortly after the ear incident. And while that painting has provided art historians and professors countless opportunities to contemplate its possible deeper meanings about spirituality, depression, hope, even Christ himself, Van Gogh considered it a failure. There are a lot more of us, we, the wounded, the hurting, the afraid, the confused, the broke, than there are successful rock star types. Don't let anyone or their social media account tell you any differently. We can whistle past these graveyards, or we can stop, come inside, find our friends, sit down, and have a meal together. Somewhere off in the distance, we're likely going to hear the aging, softer, gentler voice of a songwriter who has been sewing his heart onto his sleeve and dodging axes for a long, long time. He's one of many bards here in Struggleville, and something tells me he'll keep writing these songs as long as there's breath in those lungs of his. By all industry standards, Bill Mallonee is a classic music industry failure. He had several bites at the apple, access to the system, contributions by major names, and endorsements by a who's who of the intelligentsia of rock. And here, nearly 30 years after its release, the special remastered vinyl reissue of Welcome to Struggleville will only have a manufacturing run of a few hundred copies. Not really moving the needle, is it? But I have had those songs stuck in my head for more than half of my life. When plans have fallen to pieces around me, the bank account is empty, no one shows up for the concert, another friend gets sick or dies, another marriage ends, or the bad guys seem to keep winning, I hear Bill's voice singing, "Welcome, all you suckers, to Struggleville." And I remember I'm not alone in this lonely town. Sometimes the answer love gives is the hardest one to take, but at least it's an answer. And here Bill is, still writing and singing these songs. That's what lifers do. And thank God he's not alone. Okay, I'm climbing off my soapbox now. That's going to do it for this episode of the True Tunes podcast. Thanks to Bill Mallonee for his time and for cracking open the massive vault of music and letting us use so much of it. It would be great if our listeners would be extra generous over at Bill's digital music store. And for you fans who already have the music, please share this episode. Sure, post it online, that's great. But what's even better is if you think of 10 friends who love great music and conversations and personally invite them to listen. Social media posts get missed by far more people than they are ever seen by. Personal calls, texts, and conversations go a long way. If you're new to this show, welcome. If you love Bill's music, I think you might be particularly interested in our previous episodes with Michael McDermott, Bruce Coburn, Blitzen Trapper, Buddy Miller, and Phil Madeira, but it has been wonderful hearing from people lately who are digging way back into the archives and enjoying episodes all the way back to the very beginning. Make sure to check out the show notes page for this episode at truetunes.com/VOL for the full music list, some great video clips, and a lot more. As always, thanks to Phil Keggy and Rex Paul for the podcast theme, their instrumental remix of Full Circle. Please join Phil's Patreon gang and visit his Bandcamp page, where you will find tons of rare studio and live recordings by Phil and his various bands, as well as digital reissues of many classic Keggy albums. We've got great new True Tunes t-shirts, stickers, buttons, and pins available, so check those out too. And if you'd like to have me come speak in your neck of the woods, let me know. This podcast was written and produced by me, JJT, with co-production, editing, and sound design by Bruce A. Brown for Gyroscope Productions. The contents of the program are protected by U.S. copyright law and are the intellectual property of Gyroscope Productions, with the exception of songs or clips that are from previously copywritten materials. Everything on this episode is used by permission or under fair use provisions. Thoughts and opinions of our guests do not represent the positions of the producers or our sponsors. Discernment is recommended. This program is intended for the private use of our listening audience. Gyroscope Productions can be reached at jjt@truetunes.com or P.O. Box 60401, Nashville, Tennessee 37206. Until next time, this is JJT reminding all ye suckers to stay tuned and stay true. Peace.
Vigilantes of Love, Athens, Georgia, blah, blah, blah. We're glad you're here. Take care of each other.